What is up, guys? Frosty here today for another Frosty Features. Today we have another one of our absolute A-Force members that are in Marvel Strike Force. Today we are talking about the inhuman, the incomparable Medusa. So if you haven't been to one of these, what this is a comic book background on the tunes that you use in Marvel Strike Force, and I am your humble guide through the pages. So with that, let us begin. According to Scopely, what this is a blog post description we are given for a character. This is essentially all the lore they give us before the character comes out, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this to you, and then I'm going to rate it at the end of the feature after I go through all of the things from the comics with Medusa that I want to talk about. Medusa. Medusa was born into the royal family of Inhumans, and she discovered her incredible powers after exposure to the Terrigen mists, which gifted her with prehensile hair she could control with precision and strength. As queen and wife to Black Bolt, she became a fierce and wise leader, using her unique abilities to protect her people and maintain order within Atalan. So, we will rate that at the end of the feature. This is Medusa. Name, Medusalith Amaquilin. You can pronounce that however you want. It's written, and there it is. First appearance, Fantastic Four number 36. So, the Inhumans in general have been around for a while, 1960s. Fantastic Four number 36 is very early on in the Fantastic Four series, so ultimately Medusa has been around for a very long time. A very important note for those of you who may watch this video and get a fire under your butt and decide to go researching, Medusa very much plays second fiddle to Black Bolt. Black Bolt, even in Marvel Strike Force, Black Bolt predates Medusa by a significant amount years, and even though we have a whole Inhumans team without Medusa, and very much, especially for me as somebody who reads a lot of comics, plays a lot of video games, whatever, Medusa is the second name that I think of when I think of, debatably third, because I think of Lockjaw, because I got a thing for dog. I love dogs, right? But Medusa is one of the top names you think about for Inhumans, and we've had an Inhuman team in this game for years without Medusa. So Medusa comes at the behest of being an absolute A-Force. So, just something really to keep in consideration. Even in her own blog post description that we read, they reference Black Bolt. That's how important she is to him, and he is to her. But as a character by herself, because Black Bolt can't speak like regular folk, Medusa is actually his typical translator when they're together, because they also have a big thing where they like to break up, come back together, break up, come back together kind of situation. So at the end of the day, we're going to focus on Medusa as a character and try not to bring up Black Bolt as much as we can. Powers and abilities. Inhuman anatomy. So, super strength, super speed, super reflexes. At every situation, we are above the strength of a regular human being. And then we have, trichokinesis, which is a scientific word for being able to move your hair at will, right? So essentially telekinesis of the hair. For those of you who aren't aware, not everything is telekinesis. There's multiple things. Obviously, trichokinesis, there's pyrokinesis, endokinesis, there's a bunch of stuff. Look it up. They're pretty cool. A lot of different things, but ultimately kinesis, you can control things with your mind. In her situation, she is psionically controlling her hair, so she can control it down to individual strands. And it's explained that her hair, each hair essentially works as a separate arm, right? So she can kind of use thousands and thousands of arms with her giant hair, right? And then she's also superhuman, so her hair is superhuman too. Aliases, no duel. Okay. As far as I could tell, and as far as I remember, and as far as I've read, the only thing that changes with Medusa is whether or not something comes before Medusa. So we have Madam Medusa, we have Commander Medusa, things like that, Queen Medusa. But as far as I'm aware, she really only goes by Medusa. So I'm going to call her a no duel, but at the end of the day, there could be something out there, but since the 60s, it really is just Medusa, and that's what you need to know. Affiliations. As much as we like to complain about how Marvel Strike Force, those of us that care about lore, how little Marvel Strike Force seems to care about the team the team affiliations, even though Medusa isn't in the Inhumans, which she may even have the tag, but Inhumans are irrelevant. She's coming in with absolute A-Force, and that's just sort of where it's at. But she did have an affiliation. So we talked about the Inhumans. She is biologically an Inhuman. She also was a part of the A-Force kind of on and off for years. And then also, most notably, she had a dalliance with the Fantastic Four. She has a kind of short-term love affair with Human Torch, which kind of leads her to working with the Fantastic Four. But she also has an evil streak where she is with the Frightful Four. But namely, these are the big ones I wanted to point out and bring up, and I think it's cool. So there it is. Background. Medusa is a royal Inhuman from Attilan. So Attilan is this like hyper technical city that is essentially the Inhumans' home, and it flies and it moves around. Sometimes it's in the Atlantic Ocean. It could be over various cities. Most often that maybe not most often, but what I'm most familiar with is Attilan being on the moon. So they end up taking it to space, which is super fun. Which is why I have the cosmic background behind Medusa. So, yes. Who died? Can't be a superhero supervillain without somebody dying. And in this case, Agon and Rhinda, who are Black Bolt's parents. Medusa wouldn't be who Medusa is without these two dying, and therefore her being pushed into the role in which she is in. She was sort of predestined for the role, but how she got there is greatly affected by the death of these two, which, like I said, are Black Bolt's parents. We'll get into that in a bit. Tensile strength. So, with her hair, according to Marvel lore, her hair is rated at each strand of fiber is, I want to say it's double the strength of an equivalent strand of iron fiber, right? So her hair is stronger than iron, maybe steel if it's double. So each strand is stronger than iron, therefore banding them together and stuff you get an increase of strength as the strands, the strands become wire, become thicker. It holds a lot more down, right? So her strength may be superhuman, but her hair strength is debatably maybe superhuman, like very, very strong. So a very important thing to note, especially with her being able to control it the way she does. Now, does that mean you can't break out? You probably can't, but if we try to hold down the Hulk or something with this, it's probably not going to work. But Iron Man, it happens. She pins Iron Man down in full suit of armor, right? So these are the things you got to keep in consideration. Interestingly overshadowed. So, this is kind of that situation with Black Bolt. She serves as his interpreter or whatever. There are points in which, she operates without Black Bolt. Like I said, there's a point where they get divorced, they break up, they're not married, which is what divorce means. But ultimately they break up and they go their own ways, and she has little affairs with like I said, the Human Torch, Gorgon. We're gonna talk about him a little bit, but another Inhuman she's into, and she kind of dives into a few different options. But for the most part, Black Bolts are boo, whether they like it or not. There are even runs where they're not married and not lovers, but they're very close partners and working. But at the end of the day, she is her own character and can stand out. But the thing is the majority of the media that covers her very much isn't standing out. She isn't standing out. In the current situation, this is another one of the rare times I'm going to give Marvel Strike Force and Scopely a little hat nod. Her not being released with Black Bolt actually kind of gives her that little extra benefit of the doubt, lets her stand out from the Inhumans, and lets her kind of be her own character. So kudos to Marvel Strike Force in doing that, because that actually is it's pretty cool to be able to give her that situation, because, like I said, she is heavily associated with her male counterpart, who's significantly stronger. Relationships. Kaylin and Amber are her parents. Parent Inhumans. Also for the Inhumans hierarchy, Inhumans kind of lore and stuff like that. We've talked about it a few times. So Frosty features Quicksilver is a good one to check out for pertaining to her sister Crystal, right there. Her sister Crystal is I cover heavily in Frosty Features Quicksilver, and then Frosty Features Ms.Marvel Hardlight goes into how Inhumans are made and things, so I'm not gonna hit that again exactly. So if you're interested in actually how Inhumans work, ultimately they're a form of meta-human, right? They're derived from human beings and put somewhere else. Is in short. So Kaylin and Amber, parents. Crystal is her sister. Crystal in the game. Crystal in the Inhumans team. That is her sister. Black Bolt, husband / second cousin. It's important to note they're royalty, so they do the whole do things with your cousin. So Black Bolt and her have a son named Ahura, who is her son and therefore second cousin once removed. And there's that. There's a very long family tree. You also have brother-in-laws. Technically, Ronan the Accuser is related to her and Black Bolt. Maximus, which is Maximus isn't in Marvel Strike Force, but if you play Marvel Snap and things like that, Maximus is there. Maximus is an Inhuman we'll talk about quite a bit today. But Maximus is her brother-in-law, things like that. So she actually has quite a bit of relationships. These are kind of the key ones for her to be who she is. Notable events. So, notable events. What we've got today, we're going to talk about the origin of Medusa. So, Medusa, so with the Inhumans, this is going to come up a little bit. So, the Inhumans are created when the Kree come in. The Kree come in, they grab some humans, and they do genetic experiments on them, and they create the Inhumans, right? And then eventually the Inhumans find this stuff called the Terrigen Mist, and they choose whether or not to be exposed to the Terrigen Mist, and when they do, they either die or they develop some sort of cool superpowers. So she is born into the royal family to Kaylin and Amber, and as a child, they elect to expose her to the Terrigen Mist, which gives her powers of being able to control her hair, right? So namely what we're going to talk about for the origin, this is a retcon. When you first see her in comics, she has nothing, she has amnesia, she doesn't know who she is, and she is, that's in the Fantastic Four comic that I referenced earlier. She has no idea who she is, and then when we get to the Inhumans, it doesn't really give a background for a while. So eventually they made a kind of a retcon, kind of a background filler, like just something to just something to give how things became. So that's what we're talking about for the origin. So that's why it looks newer than the 60s. So yes, ultimately she's exposed to that, and she is raised to become the wife of Black Bolt, who is essentially the sitting prince. I mean, that is what it is. And then Maximus, who is an Inhuman that battles with this sort of like mental situation where he has like this madness he sort of fights off. And so Black Bolt tries to deal with that. Oh, another really big important thing with Medusa. Once again, Black Bolt. Sorry. She is betrothed at a young age to Black Bolt, or she is set aside for him. They're waiting for him, whatever. And so Black Bolt is kept in a cell, which we never did a Frosty Features Black Bolt to my knowledge. Maybe we did. We have so many now. I have no idea if I've done it or not. Let me know in the comments. But Black Bolt is locked in a cell until he's like 18 years old, and it's because his Inhuman power is so utterly strong that if he coughs the wrong way, he can destroy Adelan. He can destroy a planet, essentially, because some people are like, oh, he levels mountains. He can level planets with his voice, right? So they keep him in a cell until he is absolutely and utterly at the utmost tippy top of discipline, so that there's no struggle, or there's no chance that he goes out and whispers and kills an entire population, keeping a nuke in a situation. So Medusa would sneak to his cage, his cell, and they develop a relationship, and they because some people are like, oh, Medusa and Black Bolt speak sign language. They do not speak American Sign Language or British Sign Language. They speak a sign language that they make themselves, which is pretty cool. So through this, they learn to communicate with each other through these through this sign language. Eventually get a telepathic link to one another, but even so, they use this sign language to communicate, and then they fall in love, and that's how we kind of get all this started. So down the road, Maximus and Black Bolt are doing things, and Maximus has a bout of madness, and he is like, I'm gonna betray all the Inhumans, and I'm gonna take over the king, and blah 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 blah. And Black Bolt finds out, and after he's free, and he runs to stop Maximus, and they're on this spaceship, and in trying to stop Maximus, he blows up a ship to stop Maximus from escaping, and this blown up ship crashes into the New Genetics Council, which kills Black Bolt's parent, both of their parents, their brothers. So it kills their parents. With this, we don't have Maximus really tried in any way, but then we have a king that steps up into the place of Black Bolt's parents because of they're not passing it on, right? So his name, they call him the Unspoken King, and for the life of me, I couldn't find his name. Even in the comic, they don't really say his name. So if somebody out there knows what the Unspoken King's name is, let me know in the comments. I literally have no idea. I couldn't find it. I don't remember it. But they refer to him as the Unspoken King. So this king steps up. He's put into power because these two had done screwed up. And then after he's put into power, there is a point at which they work very closely with the king. The king actually trusts them at first. They build back up the trust. They're still princes, they're still of royalty, and he kind of respects that. And they are ultimately looking to build a monument using these people that are called the Alpha Primitives, which essentially are very low intelligence slaves that they use, which is really bad. And there's a whole Inhumans arc where, they fight back about, they try to emancipate the alpha primitives so that they free them all and they kind of let them be, but also they still keep a couple around for things like this, building a monument. So as they're planning this monument, the alpha primitives kind of automatically stand up and they attack Black Bolt, Maximus, and the Unspoken King, and using neural inhibitors, they knock out the king. And with the king incapacitated, Black Bolt and Maximus stand up and beat the crap out of this uprising and pretty much knock him out. Trying to save the king, what have you. And protect their way of life, however you want to look at it. And so after they foil this plot of the Alpha Primitives, the king wakes back up and he is like, I can't have people knowing that you saved me. That's crazy that's a thing. So I don't like, all of a sudden he doesn't like Maximus and Black Bolt anymore. Flash forward, so this is all important. Flash forward to Medusa. Medusa was betrothed to Black Bolt, but now the Unspoken King is very interested in her, as well as his viceroy, Kaldek. So Kaldek is a shifty character, and he sneaks up on Medusa and overhears her confiding in somebody about the things she doesn't like about the king, how she truly feels about the king, which is not good. And he records it, and then he's like, you know what? I know how to get love. I'm going to use this blackmail. I'm gonna use this as blackmail. She's gonna love me, and it's gonna be great. So Kaldek goes to her and is like, yo, I'm gonna blackmail you. You love me. He never has to hear this recording. And, in here in the recording, framing her essentially for treason. And he ends up, ultimately she sees it as a bad gig, right? So the in shunning mode or whatever, the people that don't like the king, we got Black Bolt, Maximus, Medusa, and then one of the Alpha Primitives that is more intelligent than the other ones, Aisha, I think his name was, Aisha, and all of them are like, all right, we're gonna grab Puppy Lockjaw. He's a puppy, it's cute. And we're gonna go to New York City, and we're gonna get away from all this stuff, and it's gonna be great. So, because ultimately what they're doing is they're trying to go to Earth, find some allies, find some weaponry, whatever, and then go back and retake the throne that is properly theirs. And so they go to New York City, run into Spider-Man, they get some cool tech, whatever. And while they're out, Kaldek goes to the king and he's like, hey, we need to find them and kill them. And then the king's like, well, we don't necessarily need to kill them, but like, let's definitely find them and bring them back. So he sends Kaldek to go find them. And as eventually they get all this tech, and they go to or they're in New York City. Kaldek finds them and they end up fighting, so it ends up being the small group of Inhumans versus the Kaldek, and Spider-Man actually jumps in and helps with this situation. And they go back and kind of reconcile with the king, and then Alistair with all the Aisha, with this new tech, decides to try to bring up another uprising against the king, and Black Bolt, Maximus, Medusa, and friends they stomp down this situation with the Alpha Primitives, and they're like, okay, look, we're gonna free the Alpha Primitives. And the king's like, oh, you can't do that. They had this thing called the slave engine, which creates Alpha Primitives, and he's like, oh, we don't know where it is. And they're like, well, if you're not going to tell us where it is, then we're going to overthrow you. He's like, too bad, suckers. They fight him, take it over. Black Bolt stands as king. Medusa becomes the queen, and then we get the reign of the Inhumans as we know them, right? So that's kind of that's sort of that background and how she kind of gets established as that. Next is the Royals story arc. The Royals story arc is pretty interesting. I think it's 11 issues long. Double check me on that one. But after Inhumans versus X-Men, which we talked about extensively in Ms.Marvel Hardlight feature, after the events of Inhumans versus X-Men, what we have is a situation where the Terrigen Mists, which is what gives the Inhumans powers to them, the Terrigen Mists are destroyed. And so the Royals essentially is what, this line is what happens when they don't have the Terrigen Mist. So very importantly at this time, the reason why I want to point this out, this is the arc where Medusa is not overshadowed by Black Bolt. She's debatably a lead lady, so it's definitely worth the read. Ultimately, they're kind of in a broken up situation. They kind of work together, whatever. And also in between what I just told and all this other stuff, Maximus has given into madness, and Maximus is generally a bad dude. So ultimately, because they're breaking up, getting divorced, whatever, Medusa's last act as queen is she wants to arrest Maximus and put him in prison for the rest of his life, floating around in space, whatever. And so in trying to do that, they arrest Maximus and send him out. But lo and behold, we find out pretty early on in the story, it actually was Black Bolt, and Maximus disguised himself as Black Bolt. So, Marvel Boy, a Marvel Boy from a separate universe, I forget which designation, he comes out and he is like, yo, I know how to get your Terrigen Mist back. We need to go find the Protogen and the progenitors, and that can help bring your Terrigen Mist back. Assemble a team and let's go. They assemble a team of 7, and then a prophecy is heard that only 6 of the 7 will return. At this point, we don't necessarily know that Maximus is Black Bolt, but anyway, so the 7 take off. Marvel Boy, Medusa, Gorgon, Flint, Black Bolt, yes, and a couple more. So they take off, and what they're doing is they're trying to go to this place called Hara, which is the essential like birthplace of the Kree. So in doing this, what they find out. So as I said before, the Inhumans were created by the Kree, right, as a genetic experiment. They find out that the Kree were created by the progenitors in the exact same way. They were a race of people was stolen, they were genetically experimented on, and then the Kree were made. So the Kree, so it goes progenitors, Kree, Inhumans, humans essentially. So in this, and they found out instead of using Terrigen Mist to change the things, they use this thing called the Protogen. So the original Terrigen is developed from the Protogen. So ultimately, they're going to Hara to try to find these things. They have a run-in with Ronan the Accuser, and this is how they kind of find all these things out, and they end up having to take him out. And ultimately, what's going on? One of the big things that's happening here is Medusa finds out. She's like, oh, I'm not feeling super hot. And the Terrigen that is in her body, because the lack of the Terrigen Mist does not ruin current Inhumans. It ruins Inhumans that are wanting to use the Terrigen Mist to get their powers. So Medusa starts feeling sick, and eventually her hair starts falling out, which for Medusa is a really big problem. And it's one of these points where, you know, you might think she has some sort of disease, whatever. The Marvel Boy comes up and he's like, yo, just so you know, Terrigen works very similar to magic. So it's like a mix of science and magic, and the Terrigen knows that you had a hand in destroying the Terrigen Mists. You had a hand in destroying the Terrigen Cloud. It's pretty pissed at you for that, so it's gonna kill you unless we figure this out. So we get that sort of exposition. So eventually, when we get there, they sneak the Protogen from the progenitors, and exposing herself to the Protogen, she gets her powers back, her hair grows back, Everything is swell. So with that, they end up in a last battle with Protogen, and at this point, I referenced a love affair with Gorgon. Once again, she's not with Black Bolt. By now, we figured out that Black Bolt that is with them is actually Maximus, and Maximus has been, but ultimately they're out in the middle of nowhere, and they're like, well, I guess you're still with us, so they're not running with Black Bolt anymore. They know it's Maximus, and they're just kind of leaning into it. But ultimately, she has a love affair with Gorgon. They're in a fight with the progenitors, and they're trying to get away because they're very strong. And Gorgon's like, I'm gonna have to stay behind. I love you. Goodbye. And she's like, okay, but goodbye. And they leave. So the prophecy comes true. Only 6 of the 7 return, leaving Gorgon behind to get back to New Adelan. And also all this time she can't connect. She can't telepathically speak to Black Bolt, because after she finds out that Maximus is a thing, she can't actually contact Black Bolt because of the cell he's in. It kind of blocks psionic and telepathic waves or whatever, so she can't even talk to him after she figures it out. So they go back to New Adelan, and they're trying, he's off in space somewhere, because like I said, they just shot him into nowhere. And they are, Marvel Boy's like, yeah, these guys are gonna be super wicked strong. The only way we're gonna actually be able to defeat them is to go onto the astral plane. So you need to go onto the astral plane, and Maximus is the one that figures this out. You need to go to the astral plane and destroy their souls, more or less, so that we actually have a chance of being able to beat them. That's what Maximus's situation was. So she goes to an Inhuman known as Reader, and Reader sends her to the astral plane, and upon arriving in the astral plane, she finds Black Bolt also on the same plane, and they reconcile. They aren't lovers, but they're strong partners, and the two of them band together on the astral plane and eliminate the threat known as the progenitors, and are able to retrieve Black Bolt thusly and reconvene once again as the Inhumans. Due to this also really big slap in the face of the progenitors, they're like, that hurt, that's not worth it, we're not going to attack them again. And until this recording date, I don't believe they do. So that's cool. So that's that. Yes. So, in Marvel Strike Force, they don't care about power levels, but here on Frosty Features, we do. Now, the way that this works, if you are a multiversal threat, you are a threat not just to your reality, but all realities, being able to topple the multiverse at a whim. Universal means you are strong enough to knock down a reality, maybe hop on over to the next one, and take that one out, killing, destroying, what have you, realities, one by one by one. Cosmic means that you have power equivalent to that of a planetary-sized bomb. You can destroy things like small planetary bodies all the way up to large ones, or even with enough time and effort, being able to destroy things like small solar systems or galaxies. Nuclear means you have power equivalent to that of a nuclear bomb, leveling things like small cities all the way up to a small planetary body with enough time and effort. Super Soldier means that you are beyond all human capability at the absolute utter peak of human training plus, right? Being able to lift tons, right? Being able to level things like brick walls, maybe up to a city block with enough damage and such. City means that you are essentially equivalent to that of the highest level trained human being there is. In Marvel, we have a lot of our mercenaries, our ninjas, our secret agents, and things like that kind of at this level. So think Olympic level athlete. And then there's Greg. Greg is the undead Asgardian that is spawned by Hela in Marvel Strike Force. Without the Undying team to back him up or anybody else, Greg isn't worth anything. So, due to undead Asgardian physiology, just because I like to make the argument, I equate Greg to that of a regular human being. So, if I was at the barber, getting a nice little beard trim and talking well to my barber man, and in comes Greg, and he comes in, and he's like, I'm here to steal all the shaving cream. And I'm like, no, good sir, stand down, ye. I will stop the villain from doing this. And then, he has his bag full of shaving cream. He tries to take off. I grab it, pull him back, throw him to the ground. We hop down, a little ground and pound tussle. I, as a regular human being, regular Frosty versus an undead Greg, I theoretically could beat him as it stands. So, in the case of Medusa, what we have here, we have an inhuman anatomy, which automatically puts her at least at super soldier level. Here's the thing. She has long hair. It's very strong hair, and she has very, 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 very limited psionic abilities. With that, I only rate her at super soldier. She does have super soldier physiology, but then her extended powers that are her hair as strong as they can be, maybe even being strong enough. Well, there's no evidence that maybe she could shield herself with her hair and survive a nuclear bomb, right? Like even being able to hold down certain nuclear strength characters, she has to be well within reach to do so. So her powers very much are limited. As strong as she is as a character, she is only effective close range, right? So these, in the case of Medusa, I think she's very firmly in super soldier. Very much has a good chance one-on-one being able to beat like Captain America level people, because at the end of the day he just has enhanced physiology and he's smart. She is wicked smart, has the enhanced physiology, and has a little bit of an extra power. Very similar. I would put her a little bit more on the level of Spider-Man, right? She's super soldier with another extra little trick, right? So not quite enough for nuclear, but very far into the super soldier, maybe even middle of the road super soldier, middle to upper road super soldier level. That is Medusa. And in the case of According to Scopely, what we have is once again a very generalized description. We talk about Black Bolt almost as much as we talk about Medusa, which we're not a big fan of, but nothing's wrong, which makes that nice. They didn't twist anything up, so I'm going to say nice try. It's not that bad, and it is a pretty nice little base to the character, but due to the fact that they are probably one of the only video games ever to release Medusa on her own without Black Bolt, they could have capitalized that on a little bit, but of course, Scopely isn't really thinking that way, and, you know, maybe that's not a big part of their player base, so maybe they don't care, but regardless, it'd be nice to see kind of things like this. So anyway, that was Frosty Features Medusa. I hope that you all enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments your favorite moments with Medusa or anything I got wrong. I would love to hear it. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe here on YouTube. It doesn't cost you anything but a couple of clicks, and it would help me out so much. Also, as a reminder, I stream at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time on Sundays, where we do Frosty Features live, link above. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you all have a fantastic weekend. Most importantly, all, stay cool.